Hamnah, thanks so much for joining. To begin, talk to us a little bit about what TTRPGs actual play are, how you got into it. I'm excited.
Yeah, TTRPG actual plays are a form of long form improvisational acting, essentially. Basically, the way that it works is that you have a bunch of people come to a table, virtual or physical, and everybody creates a character and plays through a tabletop role playing game.
Hmm.
So the one that I'm sure that most people are familiar with is Dungeons and Dragons, but there's a whole host of them that exist out there that people can play through. So things like Apocalypse Keys, things like City of Mist, Masks, etc. So whatever game people want to play, and the whole point is to come together as a table, as a group, and then to tell a story together. To take these characters through a narrative, similar to the way that audio dramas work or the way that TV shows even work or movies. The only difference, obviously, being that it is improvisational rather than scripted. So people aren't coming down with like pre written lines that they're reading. Rather, the most preparation usually that people will have is they'll have talked before about like, okay, like what are the story beats we want to hit? Like, what are the
Hmm.
kind of general flow of like the session that we want to aim for? And then from there, the game master or whatever the facilitator role is called for that game will be the person who's responsible for like narrating you through and leading you through that story. And you kind of just follow it where it goes, which is, I think, magical in and of itself.
Well, in like role playing game, like you're identifying with the character that you've set up, and so your responses are probably to that. Also, when you were listing off games, does Gloomhaven count?
Gloomhaven, I do not think counts as a TTRPG. Um, Wait, actually, hold on. I need to double check that I even know that I'm thinking correctly in my brain what Gloomhaven is because I
It's in
might
the
be
D and
missing.
D realm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, then yes, I'm gonna look it up really quickly right now.
I love when we do a quick Google because but I was like, oh crap, please let the one I play with my neighbors count. It's awesome,
I
by the
mean,
way.
okay, so technically Gloomhaven is a board game, but
Yes.
honestly,
The
the
style is
the
close.
yeah, I was gonna say like the borders between board games and between tabletop RPGs can get kind of like loose at times depending on the game that you're playing, especially when we consider like larping or like live action role playing,
Yep.
right? That's, I think, can become a really interesting kind of marriage between the two formats. So I mean, if you want to call Gloomhaven a TTRPG, why not? I say go for it.
I appreciate that. It probably isn't, but it's as close as I've come.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is just when people hear improv, they're mostly thinking of, comedic improv, but there are so many other forms of improvisational work. And so that's why I really wanted to talk about this and just go through how this actually goes and, more so, how did you get into this?
Yeah, the genres of actual plays or APs out there is so broad. It's as broad as I mentioned before, like audio dramas or TV. So there
Hmm.
are obviously comedic actual plays out there that you can watch. There are also lots of really dramatic actual plays out there. There are some horror actual plays. Like it spans a whole variety of genres, which is, I think, really, really fun. For me personally, how I got into APs was that so I've been playing tabletop role playing games just for fun, like with
Hmm.
friends and whatnot, and during in home games for quite a long time now. And it's always been something that I've enjoyed. I've always enjoyed like theater and acting and performance and all of its sort of varieties in general. And I happened to stumble upon actual plays on Twitter, actually. I saw a casting call. I don't even know how this came into my radar, but I saw a random casting call for a show. It was for the System Slayers, and I saw it and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, I didn't know that this existed. I didn't know this was like a medium that you could perform in. And I'd never done I'd never done an actual play. I'd never done TTRPGs
Sure.
professionally or in a more than casual setting. So it really intrigued me. And just on a whim, I was like, sure, why not? I'll apply for this show, see how it goes. And I was very, very fortunate that I was cast to be on the show. And from there, I had such a wonderful experience with my fellow castmates, with the GM at the table. It was such a beautiful experience that I was hooked. I was like, I need to do this more often. I need to go find, and that's sort of where I started then digging into like, okay, like what other APs exist? Like, what is the community like? What is the industry like? And is there a space for me here? Like, is this something that I can pursue? And I mean, originally for me, it was very much just like a hobby thing, right? At first, where I was like, okay, yeah, this is just like a kind of fun way to just perform on the side. But over time I started to realize, oh, there's a burgeoning industry here as well. There, it's not a established one just yet, but there is a growing industry around actual plays, and potentially, hopefully, there could be a viable career here as a actual play performer or as an actual play producer. And so I kind of pivoted in that direction pretty quickly once I realized that that was an option, because I enjoy it so much and I love creating art and I love doing it in this very specific medium that's so unique compared to other ways of performing, that I was like, yeah, if I can make this a career, I really want to.
Well, I think there's a variety of content out there, right? And there's a variety of content for everyone. There's certainly a lane for people who just want to absolutely check out, watch a home show, watch a food show, watch SVU, and they know exactly what's going to happen. They're like, oh, the tension is going to be that in the third act of the home show, they're not quite sure if the budget's going to work, and it works out. But this, whether or not you are extremely extroverted and want to perform, or you just want to not quite know what's going to happen at any time and be more surprised, there's a pretty broad range of people that I think that would want to actually be engaged in this content and find it as a nice diversion from stuff that we kind of know the ending always.
Yeah, for me, honestly, the improvisational nature of actual plays is why I love it so much. I really like, my personal way of performing is that I will create a character and I'll have sort of a general character arc that I want them to go on. I'll say like, okay, this is where the character is going to start. They're going to start with these problems, these issues that they need to work through. And throughout the story, I want them to work through those problems in some way. And I want this to be sort of the end point, right? I want them to uh, get better in this way, or not even, right? It might be a story of like, no, I actually want them to get worse. I want this to be a story about their downfall or about falling from grace in some way. And that's kind of the extent to which I have anything planned really for an actual play. When it comes to session by session, I'm genuinely oftentimes just kind of like, again, going with the flow, following like general story beats that I may want to hit. But for me, the beauty is really seeing like, how do these character stories unfold in this scene? How does someone else's character doing something or making a choice influence the story overall, and how does that influence my character's world and their story personally? And I think that like, I can't predict, right, like what other people at the table are going to do, and I think that is the fun of it for me personally, is not being able to know, right, like what the person next to me is going to do with their character, what they've got planned, or what they don't even have planned, right? Sometimes people make choices just like in the moment that feel right for their character or for the narrative. And for me, some of the most beautiful like moments that I've had performing in actual plays have been scenes that weren't planned, or where someone will in the chat while we're performing be like, hey, I had this really silly idea, or I had this really like terrible idea for a scene, like would you be okay with like doing this like right now, and being like, yeah, like let's do it, let's go for it, and then just kind of going into that scene together. That has been some of the most fun that I've had with this medium.
Do you find it, I don't want to say better or easier, but do you find it more compelling when there's a group of people who have done this together, in synchronicity a lot, or when, I guess, three versions of this: if there's a group that's done it a lot, a group that's never done it together, or there's a group that's done it a lot and you've just added a couple new people into it, what one kind of works the best, or does it not matter? It's just improv and we just let it ride.
No, it definitely matters, I think. I think it's less about how often people have played together and more so about table chemistry.
Yeah.
And like viewers and performers alike, I think can generally agree that table chemistry can make or break an actual play. Like as an audience member, you can tell when the performers don't quite have like the chemistry with each other, aren't quite able to like bounce off of each other in a way that feels natural, versus tables where you're like, yeah, no, like these performers are like on the same wavelength, like they are understanding where the other person is going, and they're picking up like
Yeah.
hints or signals that are being dropped and sort of picking them up, passing the ball and so on. And I do think that that table chemistry really matters in terms of like how often people have played together. I find that chemistry can happen in the strangest of places. Like I played in a charity game very, very early on when I started streaming. That was with people that I had never met before. We literally showed up to the stream, and for the first time, we're playing a game that none of us had ever even played before. It was For the Queen that we were playing together, and it was immediate. Like there was so much chemistry at that table, and we had never done anything together before. Whereas I think sometimes there can be tables where you might have played for a really long time, but without that dedication to trying to build chemistry, I think sometimes like time isn't enough to help fix the problem of a lack of chemistry. And I think that's okay. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that there are just some styles of play that mesh well, and then some styles of play that don't really mesh as well. And I think it's just a matter of, if you're the person doing casting, for example, it's just a matter of recognizing like, okay, if I'm going to hire performers for this show, what is the style of each performer? And
Yeah.
like, do I think that those styles will work together? And I mean, part of what I've sort of started doing as a producer is that now I have multiple session zeros, which are the sort of pre-production meetings that we do with the cast before we actually record a show. And I've started doing multiple of those for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons that I do multiple now instead of like the standard one session zero is that I like to do a session where we just practice, where we just play as our characters. And it's meant to be kind of like a chemistry building session where
Yeah.
we are here to feel, okay, like what does it feel like to be in my character right now? And what does it feel like to play off of you as your character? Because I find that the first session or the first episode of a show can often be a little bit awkward because that's the first time those performers are playing together or actually in their characters. And if they're feeling that out, like during the episode, during the show, I find that sometimes that can hinder the quality of the first episode. And so what I like to do, and I think what a lot of people are now starting to do as well, this isn't unique to me at all, is that people will now do like false starts is what some people call them, where they will just like practice doing the role play first, feel it out off camera, and then sort of go into it with a little bit more foundation during the actual show.
That makes sense. Like once you find a rhythm, just hit record and start going. I could see that
Yeah.
very much. Talk to me a little bit about your work, experimental podcasting. God, every podcast is an experiment. Let's be honest, but yours is way cooler and way different. And I just like the idea of podcasts that are never going to be the same.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that actual plays are a burgeoning industry, right? They are relatively new as a media form, and that means that we don't really have set expectations of like what an actual play even is. And I think that's really exciting. And the work that I do when I produce APs is I am trying to sort of experiment with that and push those boundaries and figure out like, okay, like what can an actual play be? And so the last production that I produced, which is the first one that I ever produced actually, was a one shot called Guria. It was a Bluebeard's Bride one shot where it was a singular episode. It's 2 hours total. And the way that we were experimenting with that one was we were experimenting with the visuals of it. So we were trying to see like, okay, can this actual play function with a visual storytelling motif in addition to the audio of people speaking, right? Can it be that there is something to be gained from actually watching the actual play rather than just listening to it?
Yep.
And so that was what we were experimenting with Gudia, which thankfully seemed to work out. People responded very positively to that show. And with the next one that I'm currently in production for, the working title for it right now is Async, but that will change once release comes around. But what we're experimenting with Async is this idea of an asymmetrical audience experience. So this idea that no two listeners are going to hear the same story.
Love it.
And the reason that we're doing that is that this is going to be a story about the grief of time that is stolen from us by racialized and queer marginalization. There's this sort of common experience that I've heard across various sort of people from marginalized identities about having lost specific like time locked experiences that we can never ever experience again, right? This idea of like when you're a kid and you're supposed to be experiencing specific things, and how being from a marginalized identity can make those experiences either completely unavailable to you or not available in the same way as they are to other people. And so it's a story about imperfect memory, about nostalgia, and about being stuck in what ifs. And so to sort of play with that idea of like an imperfect memory or a time locked experience that's so unique that you can never ever get it ever again, we wanted to sort of create a story that gives you that experience, that once you've listened to it, no other person that is listening to this AP will have the same experience as you. You also will not necessarily even be able to recreate the experience of listening to this AP in this way. And the way that we're doing that is that the episodes are going to transform over time. So we're going to be recording multiple versions of each episode and then uploading them, sort of overriding each other, so that depending on when you listen to the actual play, you're actually going to be hearing potentially a different episode than what somebody else heard. And the idea is that all of these sort of different versions flow into each other, so it's still a coherent narrative no matter what version you hear, but the version that you heard is probably different from the version that your friend heard or the version that like somebody else heard, depending on when you listen to the IP.
See, I love this because, I mean, this is absolutely why we were having the conversation, because I was fascinated by the concept. It's clearer to me now, but what I think is interesting too, we live in a world where everybody gets a different algorithm. No two people see the internet the same, right? We all claim like, yeah, no, I've been here, I've been here. None of us are seeing that the same way. So why can't content do the same? That part to me is fascinating, right? Then aligning that with some really tough and difficult topics. The other part that's going to be very interesting is, depending on who the listener is, how they experience that too. Right? I watched a documentary from the 90s about racial identity and people with different things in the room, and how everyone perceived it differently, even if the same conversation is happening, right? And that part is very, very true and apparent, that if you have not been marginalized, it is very much harder to see that or identify that or empathize with that, and so you will see something else. There was a part in the documentary with the guy, the white guy, and it finally had the epiphany of like, oh, things are tougher when you're not straight, male, and white. Oh, crap. And you're like, yeah, no, we got there like 30 minutes ago. Where were you? But yeah, I mean, honestly, that part to me is fascinating, that you can keep doing. So how often do you want to do this? How often do you want to change it?
Yeah, it's a mini series, so it is meant to be sort of like a self-contained story. There's no chance for a season 2. I'm going to say that right now. Yeah. It's going to be the one season and that's it. But the plan is for it to be sort of 12 one hour roughly episodes. Mm-hmm. And then each episode is going to have an alternate version. So kind of like a side A, side B situation. So in total, it'll be about 24 episodes. Yeah, exactly. So like how like the permutations or different combinations of episodes is going to be really interesting. And the plan is that, once we've released like, and let's say we release like, okay, episode 1 comes out. Sometime later, we're going to replace episode 1 with the side B version of it, right? And the idea is that the side A version is not available for you to listen to at this point in time. We've overridden the episode, so you don't even have access to the original one. And so that is going to sort of reinforce this idea of like unique experiences that even if you wanted to, you couldn't go back and listen to the other version, at least during release. And then post release of all the episodes, the plan is to then create an archive that has all 24 episodes so that people will have access to all of them later if they want to. But at least during release, we want to create this very specific experience for the audience members. And the hope is that when people listen to it and, you know, they talk about it with their friends who are listening to it, that you will have some really interesting conversations, ideally, based on the different experiences that you've had. You know, you'll be like, oh, well, in episode 3, like this scene happened and that was really interesting. And somebody else might be like, well, I didn't have that scene. Actually, I had this completely other different scene. And how does that inform your understanding of the story? Because again, this is the same story, right? It's meant to be one coherent narrative. And I think that it would be my ideal anyway, is that when people talk about it, there'll be some really interesting conversations that come out of that. And I'm really curious to see, like, how do people, like you said, how do people experience and react to and interpret the themes of the story when they're getting these very different experiences of it?
Yeah, to me that part's fascinating. Like, so if you have 12 different episodes in an A and B, that's enough for. I'm not even going to do the computation in my head, but that's a lot of different combinations, which is awesome. And then for some reason, my 2024 brain started going, but I want to access them because content is so easy to find. I am on board completely with the idea of having a curated, different experience. And then, yes, I think you were correct to, have an archive at the end if somebody wants to just experience this differently or see what those differences could be, right? Because I think that part will make it even more fascinating and give you a lot of a longer tail on the content too, because people want to, if you're engaged in things, anything that I've been super engaged with, if I can find an alternate version of that, or, like basically I've been on Reddit trying to rewrite season 4 of Sex Education for like 3 months. I'm like, but what if it did this? Why was I disappointed? Because the first 3 seasons were awesome. The 4th season was weird, but it was good, but it was bad. And I'm like, I'm trying to do this with, there's so many shows that I'm like, oh, if I could change the ending. I don't know why. I never think about the middle. Not really about the beginning. It's always the ending. I'm like, oh, but if this ending or if this thing played out. But I do love imperfection. And I think that part is awesome because, I mean, as a creator, I think a lot of the time we strive for perfection, but I think in your medium, you certainly have detail, but I think you actually are delighting in what is imperfect and what is, improv, right?
Oh, 100%. I always say when I'm producing a show, I will make it clear to the team and I will make it clear to everybody whenever I talk about my shows and my work is when I set out to make a thing, I honestly do not set out for it to be good. I just set out to try something and just to make it, right? With Goodia, for example, when we were experimenting with the visual storytelling of the show, that was something that not a lot of APs were really trying to do at the time. And so that meant that I didn't really have a lot of like things to pull on to be like, oh, okay, well, like they tried that and that works. Like I didn't really have a lot of that to even pull on. So I was kind of shooting in the dark with my team on that one. And sometimes when you shoot in the dark, you miss, right? Like sometimes it just doesn't work. And I was very aware of that going into making Goodia, and I was very clear with everybody, just like, hey, like no expectation that this is going to be good or this is going to work. I just want us to revel in the joy of creating an experimental art form and also to tell a very personal story together. And I'm bringing that same ethos into async as well with the team of being like, yeah, we're going to try this thing where we like re-record episodes or where we like try to, change up scenes and whatnot. And we're going to try to create this very unique experience. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that's going to feel good to an audience member or not. And I can't predict, the success of that. But that's not the point for me anyway. No. The point for me is that I really, really want to experiment with this medium. I want to see, like, can we do this with APs? Can this be a form of storytelling? And what does that mean for the story? Can that tell us something different? Can that give us a sort of a different perspective on things? And I think that joy of creation and the joy of just like experimenting is kind of the point for me anyway when it comes to the APs that I produce. I'm really just here to be like, yeah, let's try something. Whether or not it works, that's okay. If it doesn't, let's just try something.
Well, it's like, I think you feel it's both one, two things, right? It's kind of like a play and it's kind of like a movie, because when you do a play, you get instant feedback. You know, did it go well or didn't? And when you make a movie, you spend a long time doing it, then you put it out, then you do the marketing, then you have all of the projections, and then you're like, okay, was it good? I don't know. Might have an idea, but you don't know exactly the responses. In this case, I think you do get an immediate kind of feel for how people are engaging, but then you put it out. And so you have both parts of that. To me, the whole part of to me is fascinating, because same thing as if you were a chemist, right? You know, you can plan for a bunch of things. You can have a hypothesis. You can think through things a ton. Most of the really monumental breakthroughs happen by accident. And I think also most of the best content happens by accident. You know, anybody who's listened this deep into this podcast by now knows that I don't necessarily plan things out a ton on purpose. Only that's why I found this so deeply relatable, because if I came to you with an outline of 10 questions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, yeah, we're going to have a snappy, tight, whatever, 25-minute conversation, but there's not going to be an epiphany. There's not going to be, you know, but what about this? Because
There's no discovery.
There's no discovery. And discovery is such a wonderful word, because when you discover something, then you get curious. And when you get curious, then you want to learn more. And I think to me, that's the entire exercise of this podcast. But I'm not just fascinated by what you're doing with async or whatever the name winds up being. I'm fascinated by the like 3 things you do down the road, because I can already tell where you're trying to create differently, and I'm fascinated by anyone who is trying to create very, very unique experiences, because I think it's increasingly harder in a oversaturated content market to create unique experience.
It is really difficult. And I think that what I always sort of encourage people, other creators, whether you're in APs or not, what I always encourage people to do is to just, 2 things actually, is one, to experiment. I think that we get too bogged down by what we think the rules are for a medium, you know, and I think that that can really limit us when there is so much to be had in just kind of doing things weirdly or doing things differently. And so I always encourage creators to experiment, even if you think like audiences will not receive it well, or you think that, you know, the algorithm won't be nice to you about it. That's okay. Just try it anyway and see what happens. And then the second thing that I always say is make self-indulgent art. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I think not enough of our art is self-indulgent. I think that when we're making something, at the end of the day, we should be, if there is any audience for your art, it should be yourself, at least, right? You should always have at least an
Yes.
audience of one, and that's you. If you don't like what you're making, then why are you making it, right? And so I'm always quick to say, like, yeah, I make the shows that I make for myself at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day. I make them because these are the shows that I think are A, fun to perform in, fun to produce, but also B, fun to watch. Like, I would go and I would watch my shows. I would cringe a little because watching yourself perform can be a little weird, but
Gets easier.
I think overall, like I do genuinely like the stuff that I make, and I think that we should all feel that way, right? We should all be making stuff that makes us feel good, and I think that can be really easy to lose sight of when we're focusing on things like metrics and you know, like the algorithm and our audience reactions and things like that. Which, I mean, we all have to pay attention to
Yeah.
if this is our career. That those are literally the things that determine whether or not we're successful. But I think that there is a balance to be struck between chasing that success versus actually enjoying the things that we do, you know?
Well, all those metrics are important, right? But at a baseline, right? The prerequisite to anything is that you're going to be able to hear or see whether or not I'm enjoying something. And if it sounds like I'm filling out my taxes, then we are in trouble. when you were talking, I this is almost impossible to do with certain things in culture, but I was thinking about, okay, I find a bunch of people who have never watched Game of Thrones. I make them watch all of the first 6 seasons, but only the first 6 seasons.
That's so much.
I'm I know. No, no. I'm not. I'm throwing a very extra idea at you, but you made me start thinking about the medium. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, okay, I want to force these people who have somehow never seen or never heard about Game of Thrones, which I think is going to be hard, but it's doable. Those people exist because I managed to wait until the 5th season to even start watching it, and I avoided all spoilers. And I don't know how I did that, being perpetually online. But so you make them watch all 6 seasons, so they are not influenced by knowing what the final season is. They all watch season 6, and then you do an actual play that is just season 7 and see where it goes. And I bet you it'll be better.
Honestly, that's kind of funny, and I want someone to do that now. Because as somebody who did watch Game of Thrones as it was airing, I was so disappointed by the end of that show.
Well, because they lost the source material. That was the thing. Once they got to season 7, they were, in fact, kind of like doing it. I mean, they planned it, but to me, that would be, or even, I mean, flawed exercise possibly, because you're going to be influenced if you know what happens in 7. But now I'm like, okay.
No, that would be cool. Free idea for listeners. Do this.
No, we're not giving this away. What are you talking about? No.
Sorry, my bad.
Yep,
my bad.
No. Well, no, I mean, by all means, go ahead and do this. And if you do this, tag us in it, because we will absolutely consume that content. But I'm like, no, come back on the show and we do that.
Honestly, that would be really funny.
I actually think that is a real thing we can set up. That is a real thing we can do. And now I want to do it. And now I'm also putting it into the podcast. So now I have to. So that's what I'm saying.
If you've said it to your entire audience, they're going to hold you to it. So
yeah, hold us to it. So we will figure out how to do an actual play of season 7 of Game of Thrones. And I bet you it'll be our most listened to episode ever, because people will be like, hell yeah. I'm so mad about so many things. To be fair, some of those things in that season were good. I'm not saying it was all bad. I enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as seasons 1 through 6. And I think that's probably most people. Although, to kind of bring it full circle, when people are really invested in content, you almost can never get the ending right. Partly because people don't want it to end, right? Everybody has a different idea of what the ending is. So that comes full circle back to your content where it isn't the same. So therefore, you'll have a variety of experiences. And I think that the data or the feedback will be fascinating just as much as the content.
Yeah, my personal approach to creating APs is that I don't release an AP until it's completely finished recording. So I do pre-recorded APs. I don't, when I produce shows, I usually don't live stream them, at least not for my major productions. I pre-record them, have them be an edited product, and then put them out. And for me, I have a sort of personal perspective of the whole thing needs to be recorded and done and made before even episode 1 comes out, which is different because a lot of APs are sort of like, especially if they're live streamed, are kind of like ongoing in real time. And part of what I like about having the whole thing done before it's released is that we as a team have internally decided that this is the story and that we feel good about that story, right? Mm-hmm. We have had opportunities to, re-record an episode if we didn't like it, or, to do something like that. Like, we have had an opportunity to internally sign off on it and be like, yeah, like this feels good in terms of how we did it and how it ended. And there's very little, actually there's none, there's no opportunity for that to be influenced by an audience reaction, which can sometimes be very difficult when you're sort of creating an AP in real time and seeing audience reactions, which can be really, really invigorating, but it can also be really difficult when the audience reacts poorly to specific things that have happened. And I mean, that has happened to me before. That has happened to some of my fellow performers before, where like they will make choices or there will be scenes that happen that feel good to the table, but then don't necessarily feel good to a particular audience member. And then again, because it's the internet and you can get sort of that instant feedback, you hear about it, right? You hear sort of that negative reaction, which can then potentially influence the way that you play next episode. And so the sort of nice thing for me about pre-recording and having a completed product before we release anything is that there is no chance for that. And so if there is any part of the story that an audience member is not resonating with or, you know, reacts poorly to, that's okay. And you're allowed to sort of have that reaction and opinion. But at the very least, it's not going to influence the way that the story kind of pans out.
Yeah, no, I love that completely. When we close these episodes, I do something called Keep It Short. It's
Okay.
three questions. The questions are short. Your answers can be however long you want them to be.
Okay.
Question one, in keeping with my idea, what's a ending season of any piece of content or show or movie or anything that you would redo?
Ooh. Okay. This is a really old one. But I remember feeling so strongly about the ending of How I Met Your Mother being so terrible. I would redo that entire season. They threw all character development out the window for pretty much every character, and I was like, what was the point? What was the point?
Well, what made that season so tough was that they were all doing other things, so they had to keep them. They're all at a wedding, right? Pretty much the whole entire season, so they're all isolated in one location. What really fell off too is that they weren't utilizing, you know, McLaren's. They weren't using the bar. They weren't using some of the standard places. So if that part felt off, and then I'm not going to spoil it, even though, my God, it's been a decade and it's been on like every streaming platform. But some people do not love that ending. I am fine with it. I'm one of the weird people that is actually kind of fine with it. I get more upset at Lost than I do How I Met Your Mother.
That's fair. That's actually funny because I actually didn't mind the ending of Lost, which is strange.
We're all different people. Yeah. We all interpret it differently. And and by the way, that there's a through line, without spoiling either, where both of them are meant to be kind of slightly anticlimactic on purpose. And you're like, oh, okay. But for some reason, one of them feels differently than the other to me. And I think it might be the difference between comedy and drama. And also, the other thing that's getting tougher too is just we're starting to exist a lot more. I mean, not in a space where shows last 10 years, but shows last 4 seasons. It's really hard to wrap up content in 40 episodes.
Yeah, unfortunately, with companies not wanting to pay actors and creators for shows past season like 1 or 2, because, you know, the longer a show goes, the more they have to pay the people working on it. Yep. It's so much more incentivized for companies to just kind of scrap shows after season 1 or 2. So unfortunately, we're not in a great place to have those like really long form stories anymore, which does really suck, I think, because it limits the potential of the kinds of stories that we can tell, because there are amazing and wonderful stories we can tell in one season, but there's also some stories that I think could benefit from having more time to sort of exist and expand.
There are people that would definitely have wanted a season 4 of Ted Lasso, a season 5 of Never Have I Ever. You know, there are definitely shows that drop off soon, but what I've heard from the streaming platforms is that once they get to 3 or 4, they've got enough content where that's the library. They're good with it, and they don't see an increasing return because it's not based on the advertising model. When it was based on the advertising model, yeah, you wanted to have that show go like 13 years. I think basically Big Bang Theory will probably be the last show that goes that long, because now we're just
Grey's Anatomy. Don't forget about Grey's Anatomy.
The show's been on so long that I forget that it still exists.
I think it's ending now, but yes, it is very long. I think so. I saw an interview about Because I think the lead actress is leaving, and when she leaves, Shonda Rhimes says that she's ending the
I
show.
think Meredith already left, and then they
Oh,
just bring
did
her
she?
back.
Never
Yeah, they bring her
mind.
back on, and they keep bringing us seasons. Look, credit to them if they keep that thing going. Look, nobody can tell how old I am from listening to me, but let's just be honest. That show was on when I was in high school, and
Oh,
I
wow.
am
Yeah.
not young. So that is wild to me. I did see a promo. Okay, so when I said the answers can be long, I was right. Mostly I hijacked it. Question 2. What was the moment where you realized, yeah, this is the kind of content. This just speaks to me and it clicked.
I think for me, that moment, I have to give a shout out to Transplaner RPG, which is another TTRPG actual play channel that puts on amazing, amazing shows. They have one going on right now called The Chaos Protocol, which I highly encourage people to watch. But I was on Transplaner's previous show, The Second Stranger. I was brought onto the cast midway through their entire sort of season. They had 8 seasons, and I was brought on like between 4 and 5. And that was the first time that I really experienced getting to make art like with APs, right? Because people's approach to actual plays is so different. And the sort of model at Transplaner really showed me that no, we can take this seriously, and like we can tell a story, and it can be emotionally resonant, and it can be profound, and it can connect to the people that are watching it. And that was such a transformative experience for me that I went, yeah, no, this is the kind of stuff I want to make. Like, this is how I want to feel at a table. And the way that people react to like Transplaner shows where they're like, oh, this connected like so much to me. Like, I feel really thankful for these characters and their story because I like see myself in them and whatnot. Like, those kinds of reactions, I was like, yeah, no, this is the point. Like, this is why we make actual plays, actually, in my opinion. And so after finishing that show, I was so deeply sad. Actually, in the last like 3 episodes, you can see me crying through them because I wasn't able to not cry while we were recording. But when we finished that show, and I didn't really have that anymore, I was like, okay, like, I need something to like, we need to keep going. We need to make something else. So that kind of really encouraged me to then start creating my own shows because I wasn't quite getting that same experience from being a part of other productions. Not to say that other productions weren't enjoyable. They were, but it just wasn't quite the same. And so from there, I was like, okay, no, I'm going to start producing stuff with this kind of intention in mind. And I have not looked back since. Producing Guria was such a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm so grateful to the team for being willing to be so vulnerable with me during that show. If you haven't listened to it or watched it, please go do so. It's a one shot about the South Asian experience post colonization. And it is very deeply personal for everyone that was on it. And I'm so grateful for everybody for being willing to sort of like go there with me. And yeah, that was kind of it for me. I was like, yep, this is what I'm doing.
So that kind of answered my original question 3, so I get to pivot. I'm going to ask you a very benign question for
Yeah, let's do
most
it.
people. I think this is a harder question for you. Maybe I'm wrong. Question 3. What does your content look like in 5 years?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see why you're saying that it's difficult. No, I agree. I actually don't know what my content looks like in 5 years, and I'm very excited that that's the case. I actually find it very invigorating and inspiring to look into the 5 year mark and go, I don't really know what that looks like. Actually, my hope is that soon I will be releasing or announcing the release of my own production studio. So all of the sort of actual plays that I will be producing will be under that studio. So keep an eye on social medias for those announcements. But my hope is that we can sort of branch out into other forms of the medium. So going into in-studio actual plays. So it's kind of similar to like Dimension 20 or Critical Role, how they sort of are in person producing actual plays. So I want to do that, but then experiment with it, get weird with it. So I'm hoping that I will do that at some point. Funding, assuming that we can get the funding to do so. but really, I don't know what my content will look like. It'll be weird.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that. It'll be weird.
Love it.
I'll be doing something that people are not doing a lot of or haven't done yet. And I can tell you that I will be working with some really, really amazing folks in the industry that I am extremely grateful to be working with. Those are the only things I can guarantee.
Yeah, it'll be weird. It'll be important. It'll have depth to it. We know that from this conversation. But if there is any takeaway from this conversation, it's that find bliss in not having the answer. Because you might find something even better than if you just pre-planned stuff. I think
Yeah.
this is wildly entertaining. Now I have to plan a
Game of Thrones. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm waiting. I'm holding you to that. I'll email you.
Hold me to it. I will absolutely do it. This was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was genuinely such a joy.